There's a lot of stuff going on here for the bantamweight division. Can't wait for featherweight. Lightweight looks really good. And then we run through welterweight. And listen, that's a stacked division too. Welterweight, Kamaru Usman looking phenomenal. Colby Covington, I think that's your fight to make. Really, he gave Kamaru such a difficult fight. The only one to really be competitive with Kamaru long term. And yeah, he broke his jaw, but I think he broke his jaw in like the second or third round and fought to a TKO in the fifth. And even then, they called it a TKO, and he was immediately like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I mean, I'm not saying that it was a wrong decision, but it showed that he's not only has the toughness to withstand a barrage of punches and not get knocked out, but he also has the gas tank. And we know he has the gas tank, so I'd love to see that fight again. And he's got a strong mind. Whether you like him or don't like him, you got to say, the guy's tough as absolute nails, and he has zero quit in him. Then you got Gilbert Burns, who, he is just a savage. The guy is so good at jiu-jitsu that he wins jiu-jitsu tournaments against jiu-jitsu only practitioners. Aside from third degree black belt Charles Oliveira, Gilbert Burns is right up there with best Brazilian jiu-jitsu in the UFC.
And he was Leon Edwards. He was the only guy to really rock Usman early on and almost actually won that fight. I think if Usman would have met him on the ground, it would have been belt to Burns. If you remember, Burns was on his back, like basically begging Kamaru Usman, fight me here.
Kamaru's too smart for that,
Yeah, he got caught with a couple of bad shots on the ground, got back up, and then lost the fight on his feet. But Gilbert Burns, absolute savage. The welterweight division is stacked.
And we're gonna see this fight not this upcoming weekend, but next weekend in action. Leon Edwards versus our guy, our logo, Nate Diaz. That's going to be a phenomenal fight for the welterweight division. I don't think it's going to get Nate Diaz like a title shot. I don't think he's even really going to be ranked as much as he's just a guy who's going to come out of nowhere and just ready to scrap. I don't think he necessarily wins, but we're going to see how good Leon Edwards is, because we really haven't seen Leon Edwards fight with the exception of 6 minutes that ended with him basically pulling Bilal Muhammad's, entire eyelid out.
Yeah, so, definitely. That's what it is more than anything. It's a test for Leon Edwards, because he has been talked about for a long time, and he's had so many matchups. I believe he was supposed to fight Hazmat, and that kept getting canceled over and over again, only for Hazmat to basically temporarily retire.
And then come back out of retirement.
Which
Dana knew he was going to do. He knew he was just
ducking?
Emotional.
Was he ducking Leon Edwards? I think that might be a question.
No, I think he had COVID, and he was just being emotional because he's never used to, not being able to train. He was throwing up blood. He had a really bad bout with COVID. You can argue that, with COVID, you're supposed to rest and allow your body to get better. And he just kept training, which is going to be bad for a respiratory infection to keep overworking your lungs. But that being said, we're going to really next week in 2 weekends, we're really going to get to see how good Leon Edwards is. And then we go back to Gilbert Burns in July on the Connor card. Gilbert Burns is one of my favorite fighters, the NMF, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Okay. What's up, everybody? I can't wait for that fight. I love watching Stephen fight. He's one of the best strikers in the UFC, bar none. He's one of the most creative strikers up there. I was going to say up there with Yuri Prochazka, but really Yuri Prochazka is up there with Stephen Thompson. They both just they just flow. They know what they're doing. Stephen Thompson, he never had his first pro MMA fight was in the UFC. He didn't have an MMA fight amateur. Absolutely mind-blowing. He was undefeated as a kickboxer. This guy has some of the best stand-up whatsoever. Going against a guy who has solid stand-up, but one of the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners, is Thompson going to be able to keep him at range with those teeps? Stephen Thompson completely demolished George Masvidal. When he fought him, George had nothing for him. Stephen Thompson was stipping the jab in his face, sticking a nice kick to the belly. He was gassing out George. He thoroughly outclassed him in every area of that 3-round fight. It was just about as dominant of a fight that is always on the feet as you can get. And I would argue that maybe he got closest to knocking out George before George was knocked out by Kamaru. And I think Stephen Thompson really poses an interesting fight for Kamaru Usman. Because, Kamaru Usman's big and, he is a wrestler by trade, but we don't see him wrestle all that much. He's got really, really bad knees. People don't want to test him in his wrestling because he's got such a big, strong upper body and he uses the cage. But when you're long like Stephen Wonderboy and you have that teep front leg and that really long jab, I don't know. I think it's a bad matchup for Kamaru. So, I mean, the top 4 or 5 fighters in this welterweight division, yeah, it's super interesting. It's a great time to be a UFC fan, Keith.